More than 2.3 million acres have already burned across the United States in 2026, and the most dangerous part of America's wildfire season has not even fully arrived yet. Across the oceans, April 2026 just recorded the second highest sea surface temperature ever seen for that month, and NOAA now says there is an 82% chance El Niño will arrive by July. And this is where the nickname comes in, Godzilla El Niño. It sounds over the top, almost like a movie title, but the threat behind it is real. When the Pacific gets too warm, rain can shift away from farming regions, floods can hit places that are not prepared, food prices can climb, reservoirs can shrink, and wildfires can spread faster. El Niño is not a new phenomenon. The Earth has been living with this cycle for decades, but there have been moments in history when El Niño arrived on a much bigger scale. How serious could 2026 get? And are we actually ready for it? In early 2026, the Pacific began sending a clear signal. Sea surface temperatures across the central and eastern tropical Pacific were moving upward. By mid-May, the International Research Institute for Climate and Society reported that the equatorial Pacific was rapidly transitioning toward El Niño conditions, with recent weekly values in the Niño 3.4 region reaching around plus 0.9 degrees Celsius. NOAA's Climate Prediction Center then issued a stronger outlook. El Niño was likely to emerge soon, with an 82% chance during May to July, and a 96% chance of continuing through December 2026 to February 2027. The timing matters because it arrives just as summer begins to build. Wildfire season intensifies, farmers start watching soil moisture, and hurricane season gets underway. El Niño can also reshape hurricane activity. NOAA's 2026 outlook predicts a below-normal Atlantic hurricane season with 8 to 14 named storms, 3 to 6 hurricanes, and 1 to 3 major hurricanes. That is partly because El Niño tends to increase wind shear over the Atlantic. Wind shear is the difference in wind speed and direction at different altitudes, and when it is high, it disrupts the organized structure that hurricanes need to form and strengthen. But that does not mean the danger disappears, it moves. NOAA also predicts an above-normal Eastern Pacific hurricane season, with 15 to 22 named storms, 9 to 14 hurricanes, and 5 to 9 major hurricanes. For the Atlantic coast, it may mean a quieter season. For Mexico, Hawaii, and parts of the U.S. West Coast, through moisture remnants and surf impacts, the Pacific side could become significantly more active. El Niño does not create one single disaster. It rearranges risk. To understand why the word Godzilla keeps coming back, we need to go back to 2015. The phrase became popular when Bill Patzert, a climatologist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, used it to describe the possibility of an extremely powerful El Niño in 2015 to 2016. It was never an official scientific category. It was a public nickname for a very strong event. In climate records, the events most often remembered as extreme years include 1982 to 1983, 1997 to 1998, and 2015 to 2016. The 1982 to 1983 El Niño brought damaging storms to California with heavy snow and flooding rains. NOAA's Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory described it as one of the strongest El Niño events of the century, and one that many people at the time did not fully understand while it was unfolding. The 1997 to 1998 El Niño became one of the most studied climate events in modern memory. California saw major storms and flooding. Beyond the U.S., the scale was staggering. Historic flooding hit Peru and Ecuador, severe droughts swept through Australia and southern Africa, and wildfires broke out across the rainforests of Indonesia and Brazil, forests that should have been too wet to burn. Around 23,000 people died, and economic damages reached between $32 and $96 billion worldwide. Then came 2015 to 2016. That El Niño helped push global temperatures higher and intensified stress on ocean ecosystems. The 2014 to 2017 global coral bleaching event became the longest on record at the time, and NOAA reported that more than 70% of the world's coral reefs experienced heat stress capable of causing bleaching or mortality during that period. This can hit the West Coast directly, from fisheries and ports to coastal communities that depend on the ocean. The Pacific is not just a blue space on a map. It is connected to California fisheries, salmon runs, crab seasons, coastal economies, and communities that depend on the ocean. During El Niño, upwelling along the Pacific coast can weaken. Upwelling is the process where cold, nutrient-rich water rises from the ocean floor to the surface, feeding marine life from the bottom of the food chain upward. When that weakens, the disruption moves up the entire chain. In many parts of the United States, one of the biggest fears during hotter and drier periods is wildfire, and in 2026, the warning signs came early. By late May, National Interagency Fire Center data showed more than 29,000 wildfires and more than 2.3 million acres burned across the country. By March 31st, more than 1.6 million acres had already burned across the country, about 231% of the previous 10-year average for that point in the year. By April 30th, that figure had climbed to more than 1.8 million acres, or about 194% of the 10-year average. By late May, more than 29,000 wildfires had been recorded, and more than 2.3 million acres burned year to date. This does not mean El Niño caused every fire. Wildfires need ignition, wind, dry vegetation, and local conditions. But climate patterns can decide how much fuel is available and how fast fire spreads once it starts. That is why the West and Northwest matter so much in this story. USDA's Northwest Climate Hub notes that El Niño can contribute to warmer and drier winter conditions in Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. More precipitation can fall as rain instead of snow. Snowpack can become less reliable, and summer water availability can decline. From Los Angeles, Phoenix, Denver, Portland, Seattle, to small towns across the Mountain West, this is not an abstract climate pattern. It can mean smoke in the sky, red flag warnings, power shutoffs, evacuations, and air quality alerts that keep children and older adults indoors. The dangerous part is that wildfire risk often looks quiet before it becomes visible. A dry hillside does not look like a disaster until one spark arrives. For most people, El Niño will not be experienced as a scientific chart. It will show up as everyday disruption. The first issue is water. In the West, water is stored in snowpack, reservoirs, rivers, and groundwater systems. When winters become warmer, more precipitation falls as rain instead of snow, changing how much water is slowly released through spring and summer. Less reliable snowpack means less predictable water for cities, farms, hydropower, and ecosystems. The second issue is food. Weather stress can move through the food system quickly. Too little rain, too much rain, extreme heat, flooding, delayed planting, or damaged harvests can affect crops, livestock, transport, insurance costs, and eventually grocery prices. The third issue is health. Extreme heat is dangerous because the body can fail to cool itself. The CDC warns that older adults, people with chronic conditions, children, outdoor workers, and people without reliable cooling are more vulnerable. In a hot summer, the danger is not only the afternoon temperature, it is the accumulation, hot nights, poor sleep, high humidity, outdoor labor, wildfire smoke, and people who cannot afford to run air conditioning all day. Then comes insurance. Wildfire, flood, heat, drought, and severe storms all create financial risk. Homes in fire-prone areas become harder to insure. Flood risk can rise even during a season that sounds quiet. Farmers may face crop losses or higher protection costs. Local governments can spend millions just to respond, repair, and recover. And finally, there is the hurricane paradox. A developing El Niño may reduce Atlantic hurricane activity, but NOAA still expects up to 14 named storms in the Atlantic. And it only takes one land-falling hurricane to turn a below-normal season into a local disaster. Not every El Niño becomes a monster. Not every strong El Niño produces the same impacts. And the United States does not respond to El Niño in one single way. The South can become wetter in winter. The Pacific Northwest can lean warmer and drier. The Atlantic can become less favorable for hurricanes. The Eastern Pacific can become more active. California may get more rain, but El Niño does not guarantee drought relief. The Midwest may see different impacts depending on timing, strength, and how the atmosphere responds. The concern in 2026 is that El Niño may arrive on top of an already warm planet. Copernicus reported that April 2026 had the second highest sea surface temperatures on record for that month, with the extrapolar ocean average reaching 21.00 degrees Celsius, just behind April 2024. In 2023, the phrase global boiling entered public conversation after UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres used it during a period of record global heat. That warning still matters in 2026. The danger is not only whether this El Niño becomes the biggest ever recorded, it is that some of its early signals are already here. More burned land, warmer oceans, shifting hurricane risk, stressed ecosystems, and the season has not even fully peaked. The name Godzilla may sound dramatic. The signs behind it are already real.